Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Bean Report YouTube channel. We've got some usual coverage for you as we're going to talk about the PWHL as we've been doing the last couple of weeks. Then we are going to a little bit of NHL hockey news that we want to talk about. And last week our episode got taken down for copyright claims because I was using footage of the World Cup qualifiers from UEFA. So we're going to briefly tell you who those teams are that won those games without showing you the the videos this time around. But we got a little coverage of that. And then we haven't talked about the NBA in a while, but the NBA regular season is wrapping up within the week. So just a quick standing update on what's going on there. But first, we're going to look at the scores from last week in the PWHL as the Vancouver Golden Knights head to Montreal to take on the Victoire, and they lost that one is 3-0. Minnesota headed to New York and lost to the Sirens 4-3. Toronto going to Ottawa won that game 2-1. Montreal, at both their games this week, they shut out opponents by a score of 3-0, shutting out Ottawa as well in Ottawa 3-0. Vancouver and Minnesota in a very high scoring affair, 11 goals scored, but it was Minnesota who won that game 6-5. New York, they beat Seattle at home in New York by a score of 2-1, and Boston, keeping the hot streak going, they won 5-1 over Vancouver. And then the last game, we mentioned last week that we try and do the last game of the week, which is usually the Tuesday night game. The Tuesday night game, again, was Boston versus Vancouver. We've already covered that game 2 other times already, and rather than covering that game for a third time, and it's not like they were the only game taking place last night. The other game we're going to look at in Montreal, as the Montreal Victoire hosted the Seattle Torrent in a pretty good matchup. So we're going to look at that game right now. League-leading Montreal Victoire hosting the Seattle Torrent here in our Tuesday night game highlight. Seattle looking to get some scoring on the board here early. Put a slap shot, that small shot. Ooh, it's a little pass, but it's saved. Andre Desbiens with a great save. We see the replay here. That shot coming barely in, and Desbiens gets her left leg in there, deflecting that one, keeping that 0-0. Early on here in the second, in Montreal with the puck up in Seattle territory. Puck's going to be bouncing around. Seattle unable to clear this one. Montreal, they're just going to get some good passing going. Shot off the net, and it's tucked away in the top left corner. Natalia Milinkova gets the scoring started for Montreal. Victoire up here 1-0. See here, shot missing, and puck's just going to find its way over to Milinkova, and she puts one in past the goalkeeper. 1 minute later, Montreal back up again, and they're going to get another goal here. Laura Stacey sliding one past Hannah Murphy in goal. We're going to see the replay here in a second as the Victoire are celebrating just a neat little pass, and it gets past the goalie there. 2-0 here early for Montreal. Hillary Knight working, trying to get the scoring even. Her shot's going to go off the back wall into the front of the net, and it's Teresa Scheifsel. She's going to collect the rebound and put it in. Seattle bringing the score to 2-1 here. We see Hillary Knight's shot deflected off the back wall, and she's going to get it, and it's going to be front of the net, and Scheifsel puts it in. Her 4th goal of the season, bring it to 2-1 here, Montreal. But later on in the third, Montreal just a little commotion as that camera's bouncing off the back wall. And it's in Montreal 3-1. Skylar Irving collects and puts one in there for Montreal. They're up 3-1 here. But third period, 4 minutes left. Seattle just trying to get something going. Desbien's just doing a great job in goal, swallowing that one up whole. Seattle still trying to get one on attack. Desbien's another save there. 2 minutes left. Seattle down to Montreal trying to clear this one away, but Seattle maintains possession. Seattle just struggling, just trying to get something in. Another one up there. Montreal still just trying to get this puck out of their territory, but Seattle's doing a good job maintaining, keeping it on. Another slap shot on goal, and Desbiens with a great save, swallowing that one up, not letting anything go. But 30 seconds here, empty net here for Seattle. Just, again, trying anything at this point, trying to slim down this lead. Another save by Desbiens. Just pushing things up going, but Montreal, they're going to get up and going with the empty net. Dangerous territory for Seattle, but it's Cheyenne Darkangelo, and she puts it into the back of the net. 4-1 here. Time's going to tick down. Montreal, they take this one by a score of 4-1. We see the benches here come out and celebrating. What a game for the goalkeeper. Renee Desbiens, 25 shots on goal, only 24 saves. 1 goal allowed, but a great game for her. Montreal with a great week for them as they went 3-0, sweeping their opponents. Montreal now 15-4-2-5. Seattle, they dropped to 6-1-3-5. For Montreal, it was Laura Stacey with her 7th goal of the year on 3 shots in this game. Lena Lundblom, she had 1 shot but 2 assists. Half of those Montreal goals were assisted by Lena. For Seattle, Teresa Schaffel, she had 3 shots and scored her 4th goal of the year. And for Hillary Knight, she managed to be one of the 2 assisters on that goal. For Montreal, their great week, again, going 3-0, they moved up to 1st in the standings. Seattle, they still maintain last at 8th in the PWHL. So now we look at the standings, and as we mentioned earlier like a second ago, a shakeup in the fact that Montreal now is the number 1 seed in the PWHL. They took over from Boston. They are 15-4-2-5. You see there 1 point ahead of Boston, and that is, if you look at it, Montreal is 15-4 in terms of wins and overtime wins, and Boston is 14-5. So meaning that those 2-point overtime wins, that's showing off on the standings right there as a regular time win for Montreal, especially that one more than Boston allows them to take that spot in the 1st seed. But both those 2 teams are clinched to the playoffs already. Boston 14-5-2-4, again 1 point behind Montreal. And those are the 2 powerhouses. Those are the 2 teams leading the way. Minnesota, they also have clinched a playoff spot, 12-3-4-6 with 46 points, but still, you look 8 points behind those other 2 who are just jarring for 1st place as we head down the final stretch. Jumping up into 4th compared to last week is Toronto. The Scepters are 9-1-5-10 with 34 points. Dropping back down to the 5th spot is Ottawa Charged, as they are 6-7-1-11, lost both their games last week, maintaining their 33 points. New York, 8-3-12. The Sirens have 31 points. And then it's Vancouver and Seattle rounding it out. Vancouver 7-1-4-14 with 27 points. And Seattle 6-1-3-15 with 23 points. Upcoming schedule, we have a lighter week for you compared to previous weeks where I feel like we've had packed schedules. Only one game tonight, 7 o'clock, as Seattle heads to Ottawa to take on the Charge. Then we have triple header on Saturday. Ottawa going to Toronto to take on the Scepters at 1. New York, Sirens taking on the Minnesota Frost at 2. And then the last Saturday game, Montreal taking on Boston at 7 o'clock. I believe saying this now that this is going to be the game that we're going to take a look at next week, that Montreal-Boston game, because both those 2 teams, that's the only game either of them play next week. And as you can see, it's 1-2 in the standings, again, separated by 1 point. So that's going to be a very important game in terms of final standings. So that's the game we're going to look at next week between Montreal and Boston. And then our final game next Tuesday at 10 o'clock, a late game because it's in Vancouver. Golden Eyes hosting the Seattle Torrent. So the next thing we're going to discuss here, and this is been a recurring topic that we've talked about here, and there's always the crowd who loves to say, keep politics out of sports. And it's usually the crowd that says that is the Republican right-wing conservative crowd who, they love to talk about politics and sports, but it's only when somebody is defending the left side or just the more democratic side of things, they tend to get their panties in a twist and like to say, hey, we don't pay you to talk about politics. We pay you to play your sport, which is BS, respectfully. It is BS that they will sit here and they will spew their hatred. And what comes to mind is Nick Bosa, who will tell somebody, hey, keep politics out of sports, and then shows up in post-game on Sunday Night Football wearing a MAGA hat. And then when is confronted about it, acts like a coward with his tail between his legs and says, oh, I don't know why I wore it. I just like the hat. No, that's stupid, and you're an idiot. So yeah, it's that crowd that loves to say, keep politics out of sports. And what happened recently was the Dallas Stars of the NHL have released a new jersey that they're going to wear. And the new jersey is, as you can tell here, it's got the American flags on it, and on the back it says, assist the officer, and has the thin blue line flag across the numbers. And this is just, it's pathetic. It's pathetic to have a jersey like that, especially in a climate like this, especially when this thin blue line flag is so directly tied to hateful conservative ideologies, and just, again, it's tied to the Triple K, it's tied to the Proud Boys, and it's something that was made as a direct antagonizer to Black Lives Matter, as the Blue Lives Matter. It's just a pathetic thing, and especially for the Dallas Stars, who recently had an incident where at a game, fans were doing the Nazi salute to their goal song, which is, I believe it's "Puck Off" by Pantera, and a fan recorded these fans doing the said salute at the game, and they do it to the beat of the song. And what did the Dallas Stars say? Oh, sorry, we couldn't find the fans that did it, and we can't ban them from coming to the games again because we can't find them. And the fan who recorded the video sent that to stadium management. They sent it to the team, and even gave the direct seat numbers of where these fans doing this hateful salute were. And Dallas is like, oh, sorry, can't find them, can't do anything about it. It then took them a little while, and they have now banned the fans from ever coming back to the arena again. And purely because the Dallas Stars kind of saw how bad they messed up by not doing anything about it. They saw social media outrage, and they saw fan outrage from what they were doing, and then decided, oh, maybe we should have done something. And then they, of course, fined the fans. They actually only banned one fan for life, but yeah, I mean, the quote from a team spokesperson says, "We identified and spoke with the individual that purchased the tickets and will be banning that individual indefinitely from American Airlines Center." Of course, the arena where the Dallas Stars play. So they are only banning the one fan who purchased the tickets, not the group of them that was taking part in this, just the one individual. They've also said that, additionally, we are increasing in-arena messaging regarding the fan code of conduct and how our fans can report violations, along with prioritizing staff training to identify and handle situations that arise. Any type of discriminatory or hateful behavior will not be tolerated and has no place in our arena. Creating and sustaining environments that are inclusive, safe, and respectful is a non-negotiable for the Dallas Stars. Of course, they're going to give this PR-loaded message like that, but clearly, that type of behavior is acceptable at the Dallas Stars arena, and it only took until the fan outrage, social media outrage, to tell them, hey, you guys really messed up, and this is something that is not okay. They clearly didn't have a problem with it until they started realizing, oh, people are mad at us. Maybe we did the wrong thing. It took that to do it, and it's just having that happen so recently, and now to unveil these jerseys with such hateful messaging on it, it's just, yeah, it's not a good look for the Dallas Stars going right now. So then we talk about, we've been mentioning the World Cup. Last week we did the videos and I mentioned the getting taken down, which is fine. We're not going to show the videos of the games this week, but we will give the update on how these teams won and moved along and who our final UEFA qualifiers are. So for Path A in UEFA, Italy ended up defeating Northern Ireland, and Bosnia and Herzegovina ended up defeating Wales to move on to the championship there. And then it was, in the end, in penalty kicks, Bosnia and Herzegovina winning 4-1 in penalties, defeating Italy and clinching Path A, one of the 4 remaining spots from UEFA. And this marks now the 3rd consecutive World Cup that Team Italy will not be at. And it's when you think of soccer teams that are usually there every year, or every 4 years, you think of Argentina, you think of England, France, Spain, and in my mind, Italy is one of those teams. So to see now a 3rd consecutive tournament where Italy will not be representing in the World Cup, it just seems kind of, it's just, I don't know. The idea just doesn't seem like it actually happened. But Italy, again, 3rd consecutive one not making it in. Bosnia and Herzegovina advancing. For Path B, Poland took on Albania and defeated them by a score of 2-1. And Sweden defeated Ukraine by a score of 3-1. And then in the games last week, it was Sweden. No penalty kicks this time. Sweden taking in regular time 3-1 over Poland. They advance in Path B. For Path C, Kosovo took on Slovenia and ended up beating them by a score of 4-3. And Turkey took on Romania and ended up winning that one by a score of 1-0. Then we see the Path C final, and it was Turkey defeating Kosovo by a score of 1-0. Not a high-scoring game, but Turkey clinching the third to last spot in the World Cup. And then Path D, our final path, Ireland took on Czechia, and that one was a score of 2-2 in regular time, and it was Czechia advancing over Ireland by a score of 4-3 in penalties. We then saw Denmark take on North Macedonia, and it was Denmark clean sweeping that one by a score of 4-0. And then in the final between those two, as we saw Czechia and Denmark take on each other, it was Czechia defeating Denmark by, penalties, 2-2 after regulation, and then Czechia ended up winning in penalties by a score of 3-1. So that is the final for UEFA in Europe, the final 4 teams to qualify in terms of the little playoff system here, and the 4 paths was Bosnia and Herzegovina, Sweden, Turkey, and Czechia. Along with these final UEFA qualifiers going on, there was the World Cup playoff tournament, and this took teams from around the world. It took 2 from the CONCACAF, which is again North America, South America, and the Central America / Caribbean. 1 team from Africa and another team from the Asian Confederation. And there was not a team selected from the Oceania, like Australia Oceania League, because there wasn't as many teams to qualify there, and no teams were selected from UEFA just because they had such an extensive, long tournament taking place there anyway, and they just didn't need any extra representation in there. So the 2 games that we saw were the Democratic Republic of the Congo taking on Jamaica, and it was the DR Congo winning that one by a score of 1-0. It was Axel Tuanzebe who had a 100th-minute goal there, putting DR Congo up over Jamaica. Lionel Mpasse, the goalie for DR Congo, had a shutout, only 1 save, because Jamaica, 6 shot attempts and only 1 of them making on goal. But DR Congo, second to last team to qualify for the World Cup. And the very last game that took place between Bolivia and Iraq, and it was Iraq winning that game by a score of 2-1. Ali Ibrahim Al-Hamadi had a 10th minute goal that got the scoring started. Moises Panaglu had a 38th minute goal that notched things up at 1, but it was Ayman Hussein, the captain of Iraq, who had a 53rd minute goal, and from there, no more scoring took place, and it was Iraq qualifying the final spot for the World Cup. So all, I believe 48 teams are now qualified, and the field is set. Well, next week we'll talk about the groupings and the schedule. We'll talk about that later on, because the World Cup does not start until June. So we have a month or 2 until 2 months. I don't know why I said month or 2. 2 months until we have World Cup games going on here in America, in Canada, and in Mexico. So the last thing we're going to look at here, as I mentioned, that the NBA is, all these teams except for one, which you maybe can tell by the little 0.5 game in there, but all of these teams have 3 games remaining on their schedule, 82 games, and these teams have played 79 games. So looking at the standings for the East, the Detroit Pistons, 57-22, they have an X next to them because they are the leaders in the East. And according to ESPN, they have a Z next to their name. That means they have clinched the conference. If Detroit loses their final 3 games and Boston wins their next 3 games, Detroit would win on tiebreaker. So Detroit Pistons, after just not being a good team 2 years ago, being abysmal, and then really starting to show signs last year, and now this year, just an Eastern Conference powerhouse, they clinched the top spot in the East. And then we have the next 3 teams who are separated by only a few games. 54-25 Boston Celtics, 51-28 New York Knicks, and the 50-29 Cleveland Cavaliers. So those teams, the Knicks can end up maybe getting the 2nd seed. Boston will end up being either 2 or 3. And then Cleveland at 50-29, 7 games back, they could potentially get the 3rd seed or the 4th seed. So those 3 next teams are just, the East can be broken up into tiers. And the top tier, Detroit Pistons. I don't want to say middle tier, because they are very good teams as well. but Celtics, Knicks, and Cavaliers, and then the rest of the East. So right now, holding on to the final two non-play-in bracket teams, play-in bracket spots are the Atlanta Hawks, who are 43 and 34, and the Toronto Raptors, who are 44 and 34. So those teams, as you can see, 12 games back, 13 games back, they have no chance of jumping up higher than the 5th seed. But then you see the cluster that is the final teams down there. Philadelphia 76ers and the Orlando Magic both tied with a 43 and 36 record. They have 3 games left, or they're 14 games back of the Pistons. Here's the team that has not 3 games remaining, and it's the Charlotte Hornets, who only have 2 games remaining. They stand at 43 and 37, played 1 more games than the Sixers and the Magic, and they lost that 1 extra game. So they're half game back from those 2 teams. And then the Miami Heat, 41 and 38, they have clinched a play-in spot. So Miami Heat have no way of making it to the 6th seed and no way of making it to the non-play. They're a play-in team. They cannot make it to the regular playoffs. So 3 games remaining. Sixers, Magic, Hornets. They could see some. No pun intended with saying the Magic, but they can see some magic going on and popping themselves maybe into the 4 or 5 slot. But it's gonna be a fun last 3 games for these teams. Atlanta, Toronto, Philly, Orlando, and Charlotte just jarring for those. And those teams are going to make up the 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 spots in the Eastern Conference. So once we have those figured out, then we'll show you the bracket. But as of now, there's just too much change going on, too much change potentially happening that it's just we're not going to be able to tell the bracket. But one thing we do know for sure, Detroit Pistons, they will be the number 1 seed. We look over now to the Western Conference, and the Western Conference has 2 teams, just 2 teams at the top that are undisputedly the best 2 teams in the conference. And then they have a more even middle ground, and then teams that are just out of the picture for any chance of getting the to the regular playoffs. So the Oklahoma City Thunder, last year's the NBA's reigning champions, 63 and 16. They currently lead in the West. 3 games remaining. The San Antonio Spurs are 3 games back at 60 and 19. And those are the 2 teams that are leading the way in the West. Those 2 teams are the powerhouses in the Western Conference. And then there's a big gap between the next group of teams, and that's the Denver Nuggets, who are 51 and 28. And then the Lakers and the Rockets, who are both 50 and 29. Both those teams 13 games back from the Oklahoma City Thunder. And then you see the last team that's just kind of in that group is the current 6th-seeded Minnesota Timberwolves, who are 47 and 32. So the way the West currently works is those bottom 4 teams that we'll talk about in a second have all clinched a play-in bracket. Their positionings might change, but they're all going to be in the play-in bracket. They have no chance of getting to the regular playoffs. I mean, they do, so in the playoff tournament, but they have no chance of earning their spot there before the play-in tournament. But these last few games, the Minnesota Timberwolves, they can't actually, sorry. But Nuggets, Lakers, Rockets, they can be a 3rd seed, 4th, 5th. And then the Timberwolves could maybe get their way up to as high as 4th, but right now they currently sit at 6th. But then, yeah, the Suns, who are 43 and 36, they're 20 games back. Clippers, they're 41 and 38. Blazers are 40 and 39. And then the Golden State Warriors, Steph Curry just returning for them, are 37 and 42. So there's a significantly bigger gap between the current 10th seed in the West than there is the current 10th seed in the East. But it'll be a fun breakdown for these games. So right now, the Thunder, Spurs, and Lakers have all clinched their division, which is the Northwest, West, Pacific, and Central. So those teams have clinched their respective divisions, and all those teams above that black line, which again is the play-in bracket line, all of those teams have clinched a playoff spot, meaning they will not have to play in the play-in tournament, and then those bottom 4 teams will be fighting in the play-in tournament. And one extra thing I just want to talk about here is just about the play-in tournament as a whole. I think the play-in tournament was a good idea when it was implemented. It was implemented during COVID, and the reason for it was some teams had 8 games remaining, some teams had 6 teams remaining, some teams had 9 games remaining. And who knows? One of those teams could have caught fire, one of those teams could have gotten hot, and jumped up into the playoffs. Because before the play-in tournament, before COVID, it was just the top 8 teams in each conference making the playoffs and no play-in tournament. For COVID, it made sense because you had X amount of games remaining that was going to affect the schedule. One team could have gotten cold and not made the playoffs. One team could have gotten hot and went on a run and made the playoffs. For that, it makes sense. Maybe the next year, it makes sense because, again, the next year after COVID was a shortened season because, again, COVID obviously threw a wrench into things, and then they had their little bubble tournament down in Florida, in Orlando. But maybe the year afterwards, because it was a shortened season, they started the season later. Fine, that's fair. But we are now 6 years removed from the COVID-19 shutting down the world, and especially shutting down North American sports. There's no reason that we still have to have the play-in tournament 6 years removed. Why can't we go back to how it used to be, where it was just the top 8 teams? Because if you look at the Western Conference, the Golden State Warriors have no business making the playoffs. And neither do really the Clippers or the Trailblazers, who are 1 and 3 games above 500 respectively. Sorry, But those teams would be jarring for an 8 seed. But it's just, there's no need for the play-in tournament now. It's just giving these, they're just slightly above that bottom echelon of teams, those teams that have just been eliminated and not making the playoffs. It's just giving them an extra chance to make it. But what are they going to do? So let's say the Warriors end up making it to the playoffs. They're going to be the 8th seed. They're just going to get swept in 4 by the Thunder. The other play-in team, what are they going to do? Get swept in 4 by the Spurs? It's just, especially when it's such a top-heavy conference like this, these play-in teams are just playing these 2 extra games just to be fodder for the top echelon teams in their respective conferences. It's, at this point, I think extremely unnecessary and doesn't need to be around anymore. I think the NBA should definitely take a look at just going back to how it used to be. Top 8 teams make it. Or if you want to get 10 teams in there, don't have the play-in tournament and give the first 2 teams a first round bye. And have actual series and then figure it out from there. Either do a first round bye type of thing for the top 2 teams, or just go back to how it used to be, being 8 teams make it and that's it. So that's my little rant there about the play-in tournament. It was fun and it was necessary while it was necessary, but it's not anymore. We don't need it anymore. Anyway, it's cold again. I miss the warmth already. I mean, that's spring for you, where it's cold one day and it's warm the next, but go out and enjoy the weather. Hopefully you don't have allergies that are gonna hurt you. But thank you all for watching and listening to another episode of this Bean Report YouTube channel. I've been loving making these videos, so yeah, thank you all for listening and watching. I hope you all have a great day.